Oh my eyes! Okay, so this is the MUSE M300, which is a desktop DAC and headphone amplifier, and it's been promoted on Kickstarter via Hi-Fi Go. Now, Hi-Fi Go, I should disclaim, has, since I have a lot of stuff in for a review, has paid for me to jump the queue and review this, although they have zero influence on what I say about it. And there's some good and bad things about it. Now, it's a desktop DAC and amp from a small company called MUSE Hi-Fi. Now, we've looked at them before because they made a really cool device called the M6 Double with these old kind of Nixie tubes, which anyone who's been around a long time will have seen back in the old days. And they picked up a whole lot of these old Russian tubes and made a little portable DAC and tube amp. And they're kind of well known for making interesting, well, tube stuff. Now, this doesn't have any tubes in it, but it is a kind of desktop DAC and amp with headphone sockets in one side and USB input and other normal digital inputs that you have on stuff. But it has this really garish, operating system for, I guess, anime fans. But if you don't like that, thankfully, you can, with a couple of clicks, change it. And so just for the sake of this, I'm going to change it to the minimalist style, which is a little bit more in my taste, as you can see. And you can also, thankfully, change the screensaver, which change that to minimalist as well. But there are three basic interface styles. Now we can talk about all the other functionality. And actually, when you're looking at this and you're seeing all these numbers and chips and names of things and trying to understand them, yeah, it can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go through the details of what's in this and my impressions. So looking at the Kickstarter project, it says the world's first desktop DAC headphone amplifier with an operating system. Not really, but that's kind of obviously a Kickstarter appeal thing. I mean, it's an established company. Kickstarter was designed for people wanting to get funding for projects. It's now being used a lot by established companies to promote projects. Well, fair enough. But I want to go through some of the fine details they talk about. We've seen all the features, custom wallpaper, blah, 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 all the interface connections, etc., etc. Now let's get into some of the internal stuff, which a lot of people won't know about. Now let's see the digital to analog converter chip 9039. That's a very common ESS Tech converter chip. It's a good, solid chip. It does the job. It's high quality. It is low distortion. It's not the greatest thing out there, but it's good. There's no issue there. The latest Qualcomm Bluetooth, fair enough. Oh, it does have aptX lossless in there, which is really great if you want a lossless Bluetooth connection, although I don't think it will be lossless all the time if your Bluetooth connection is not reliable. One of the things it doesn't say specifically is if it has aptX low latency. That might be worth checking, because if you're using it with headphones to, say, watch TV, watch a movie or whatever, then there will be a delay on Bluetooth and low latency will reduce that. That's worth checking. I'll throw something on the screen if I find out it uses that. But otherwise, I mean, most people I think will be sticking on a desk and using it with USB anyway. Customized power supply, not really. It's a generic switching power supply. The one, at least the one I received that I have, it looks exactly the same as ones I have with hard drive cases and the like. A 12 volt 3 amp power supply. And it's fine. That's exactly what you need for it. It does the job. They tend to seem to, the ones I have all been reliable. I've never had one die. The AC cable it came with was in a separate box. I opened it up to have a little bit of a look inside and found nothing particularly exciting. There are some fine details which I'm not going to talk about, which may be confusing, but an interesting one. They have things such as the low pass filter, which is an op amp. They are very common. An op amp is essentially an entire amplifier on a chip, which is fine. They're very common and they work. The interesting one is the TP6120. This is a Texas Instruments headphone amplifier chip, and there are two of them in there, which is the X2. And they are long established. I mean, we're talking 2 decades at least. I think they came out about 2004. I can't remember. They're very long established, very, very common headphone amplifiers on a chip. Now, some manufacturers use op amps as headphone amplifiers. This is an established, high power, very good headphone amplifier chip. Very generic too. And it does the job. I have no issue with devices that use it. They seem to all be somewhat similar. They have the usual coaxial input chip, which is the common AKM chip. Otherwise, everything here looks like what I see in a lot of products. But of course, it's implementation that's critical. But it looks like a solid design. And when I had a look inside, there are a couple more chips I looked in there to see how it was set up. Obviously, they've set it up to give you the tube effect that you get, which makes things slightly warm sounding, or the anime tuning, ACG tuning, which cuts the bass. So as far as the technicalities go, it's a solid design based around well-established electronics, as far as I can see. The unique thing, of course, is the OS. So let's get back into that. Now, the other thing they came with was this branded USB cable. And when I first connected it up to one of my computers, it wasn't recognized. And I thought that's pretty odd. Maybe something, I assumed that it was the device or my computer. And after mucking about with a couple of computers, I realized, and someone else who had one of these in for review, it's the cable. Now, how you screw up a USB 2 cable in this day and age, I don't know, but I have passed on to them that for customer units, they should use a generic USB cable, and for which I actually have a proper to-spec generic shielded cable from another manufacturer who just buys them from a company that makes generic spec cables and no branding or anything. So that was a bit unfortunate. So if you end up with this cable in your unit, that won't be good. You're going to have to replace it because, there's probably some cheap unshielded thing. I don't know. Maybe I should cut it open and find out. But anyway, now it should be noted that when reviewers sometimes receive early units, stuff may not be quite perfect. And I've noticed that different units have different lettering patterns on the front, so that there was some lettering on the other side on some people's units. That may change. The other thing, and it's probably my unit specifically, because I assume that they haven't screwed this up on other units, my button on this isn't always perfectly responsive. And whether that's an OS issue or a button issue, I don't know. But for me to get this review out in time, at the speed they were sending me this review unit and the time it took using the courier they chose, this was going to be the preferred option. So other than that, now it works and plays music fine. I imagine some people will be buying this who are not so familiar with the kind of modern world of head-fi audio. Now on the side there are two headphone sockets, 6.3mm, which is your standard full-sized headphone socket, and also what's called 4.4mm. This has what's called a balance connection. It has extra connectors so that you can use double amplification. Each left and right has amplifiers on the positive and negative signals. And it's a connector, actually a lot of people don't know this, it was based on a Pro Audio connector, a rather obscure one, which was designed to be a more compact version of the 6.3mm. But for the Pentacon version, the 4.4, they've added extra connectors, which the Pro Audio one doesn't have, and it's generally used for portable gear, whereas the normal balance connector is a large 4-pin XLR, which they could have fitted in here, but it probably would have been a little bit ungainly. But I think one of the targets of this device is in-ear monitor users, as a lot of IEM models nowadays come with some kind of anime connection. So, it's a big thing maybe, I guess, in East Asia. So on the back, we have a usual set of connectors, USB, optical input if you want to use optical digital input, coaxial digital input if that suits you for whatever sound card or device you're coming from, and then you have your standard balanced out and line out connectors. You also have the ability to make your own custom screensaver and connect the device to your computer as like a external drive, and then upload images and whatnot doing that. Now I haven't done that as such, but it's a pretty cool idea. And it means if you want to customize it and have it as essentially an elegant desktop DAC amp, which has maybe your own logo or something on it, which might look neat on a desk if you have an office, then that could be pretty cool. Or you just have something that you want to see, like a family photo pop up, instead necessarily of the clock or the other features they have on there. So when it comes to sound, you have a couple of different options which are very helpful. One of them which they promote, which I consider very confusing for a lot of people, is the digital filter. There are a lot of different options here, and very generally speaking, because it's a rabbit hole that the more you know, the more confusing it gets, generally pick a linear phase one for if you listen to a lot of, say, acoustic music that is real instruments, and probably minimum phase if you listen to a lot of electronica, for example. That'll probably be the extreme, but I'd choose a filter. And another manufacturer told me that he tried changing filters with one of these things, or with all his workers, and half of them could make it out a difference and half couldn't. So pick something and see if you can hear a difference. If you can't, it's not a particularly big deal. You also have the sound styles in here. There's a balanced mode, which is basically unchanged. Tube amplifier adds some warmth. I'm not quite sure how they're doing it. They say they're doing it in the analog domain. They could be inducing some even order harmonics in there, which would make it pleasant. The ACG mode cuts off the low bass, so that'd be fine if you want to prevent a pair of headphones distorting listening to, say, a movie soundtrack. I don't listen to anime music, and unless they have very low bass, that for some reason you have headphones that just vibrate and distort heavily with very low bass, then that might be an option, but it's not something I would use, for example. But the tube amplifier adding a little bit of warmth makes it easy and nice to listen with, but it's something that you'd pick. The ESS DACs tend to have something of a slightly sharp and slightly edgy sound to them. And as a result, that means that balancing that up with a little bit of warmth tends to work out really nicely. It's not the most technically accurate way to go about things, but since we're buying gear to enjoy listening, then yeah, I'd say pick whichever sounds the nicest. Some people like that slightly sharper, edgier sound. Now, as far as driving headphones go, you have a lot of variety in what headphones you can get. For example, you have very easy to drive headphones. An example I really like is the MUSE 109 Pros, not just because they're very attractive, but because they have a fairly balanced, slightly entertaining sound. And I found that I could get very good listening out of something like these from the MUSE 300. Now, you can see on the volume level there, I got up to level 40 on there in high gain. And that was more than enough for some club music I was listening to, or I would call it generically DJ music. I've been listening to a lot of mixed music lately, which I tend to like music which is mixed by DJs but uses live instruments as well. So a bit of a mix of everything all together. And that worked out very well with these. Now, with any amplifier system, they tend to run into limits. It's not about how loud you get, because how loud you get, how quickly the volume ramps up, has nothing to do with power. That's gain. Now, the gain in this is pretty reasonably high. So, for example, something completely different, I have ZMF Calderas, and they're planar magnetic headphones, and they are somewhat harder and more demanding to drive as headphones go. And that means I have to turn the volume up maybe close to the actual limit, where I can actually get up towards about 90. And at that stage in high gain, that's starting to show up the limits of the power output of the MUSE 300 and the TPA chips that are in there. It plays back fine, but it starts to get what I would describe as shouty, where it seems to be like shouting the music at you. Whereas a high quality headphone amplifier will just simply get louder, but it doesn't seem like it's under more demand. So it puts the headphone amplifiers under more pressure, being at those louder volumes. As you get louder, for every 10 decibels you increase the volume, which every 6 decibels is essentially double the volume, every 10 decibels you require 10 times the power output. And that means that puts the amplifiers under a lot more strain as things get louder, especially if the headphones are fairly insensitive, and planar magnetic headphones like these can be sometimes, although there are very sensitive planar headphones out there. Now, that meant that it started to be put under a little bit of pressure for higher quality headphones, and in that case, a separate dedicated headphone amplifier will work better. Now, at say $400 odd, yeah, you can get stuff that is pretty decent as far as driving headphones go. I think on the balance of things, what you get with the MUSE 300 is that it has a solid and fairly generic internal setup, and that it uses, as I said, generic DAC and generic amplifier chips, and they're well established and they're good, well performing within reason. But what you're primarily getting is this fancy user interface and this essentially a really nice desktop unit which looks nice on your desk and will play back music pretty reasonably well through in-ear monitors or your headphones. It won't get you quite the capabilities of some of the dedicated devices that are just primarily for audio and don't have things like custom operating systems or fancy interfaces. So I'd say if the idea of the MUSE 300 appeals to you and you want something like this, you're going to get a solid headphone amplifier and DAC. It's from a growing company, and the only thing, of course, I always hope is that the support for it, if there are any issues, is good. Now, if you end up buying one or you have one and you're watching this to see what my opinion is, do leave a comment below with your own experiences. I always like my reviews to be useful for people looking to buy a product, or, if necessary, finding out the information they need to know that the product is not for them. So any extra help with that, from actual owners would be most appreciated. If you'd like to see more straightforward reviews such as this one, subscribe to my channel and support me making more of them. If this helped you make a decision one way or the other on this product, consider buying me a coffee as well. That will help out too. As always, thanks for watching.